Today we honor the original Raider, the late, great Jim Otto. That plus a whole lot more on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for May 21st, 2024.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, you know we appreciate that. And we appreciate my man Ari. Ari does a fantastic job each and every day getting us up on YouTube, making sure we look good, we sound good, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. So shout out to Ari. You can check him out on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Your calls and texts will come up in segment number 3. Got a lot of different calls about a lot of different subjects. We'll get as many in as possible coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 1 and 2, we'll talk all things Jim Otto as he passed away on Sunday. And unfortunately, I thought I was being smart on Sunday as trying to make some plans with the family. Thought I'd take the wife out to dinner a little bit and, watch some action, some NBA action and some baseball action and, have a nice little dinner, relaxing. So knock out the podcast a little bit early. And of course, while we're away at dinner, what happens? Well, Jim Otto passes away at the age of 86. Huge deal. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get that conversation in on Monday's show. Some hit me up thinking I forgot about it. Didn't forget about it. It was just the timing with the recording, so I apologize, but that's okay. Not worried about that. We'll go ahead and jump into it in today's show in segment number 1 and 2. Segment number 1, you'll hear from different folks, including Mark Davis, John Facenta, and others about Jim Otto. And then in segment number 2, you'll actually hear his Hall of Fame speech. So it worked out really well as the Raiders sent over the Hall of Fame speech to the radio station on Monday. So I was able to play that on my radio show. Now I'm glad I'm able to bring it to the podcast. So it all worked out for the best, even though, again, not a big fan of being a day late, but it's just how it happens sometimes. So we roll with the punches, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We'll tell you a lot more about them later on in the show. And before we get into anything Jim Otto, I do want to let it be known that Phase 3, Day 2 of the Raiders offseason program continues today. We're going to talk to all 3 coordinators before practice, starting at 8:45 this morning. That's Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, the defensive coordinator, and special teams coach Tom McMahon. So all 3 of those we'll talk to before practice, and then on top of that, we'll go out and observe practice and then talk to a handful of players, probably 3 or 4 players following practice. So, of course, we'll have plenty of that coming up on Wednesday's edition of the show. But just want you to know, starting at 8:45 Pacific time, the coordinators will be speaking with the media. You can actually hear those coordinators live on Raider Nation Radio, 920 The Morning Tailgate. Now, with that being said, the conversation, the main focus of today's show is all about the late, great Jim Otto. The original Raider was with the Raiders in 1960, their first year of existence, and played 15 years and never missed a game. Like, think about that. 15 years and never missed a game. Jim Otto is known not only amongst Raider Nation, but amongst anyone in the NFL, right? You see 00, you immediately think of Jim Otto. I was on my radio show on ESPN Radio Game Night on Monday night, and I was talking about Jim Otto, and my partner Emmett Golden said, "Oh, 00." Yep, 00. That's just who he is. He's a guy that goes on the Raiders Mount Rushmore, right? Even if you didn't get to see him play, like I didn't get to see him play, but I know exactly what he meant to the organization and how big of a deal he is. The fact that I reached out to the great Lincoln Kennedy on Monday to try to get him on my radio show to talk about Jim Otto, and he responded, was like, "Q, I got to sit this one out." That's how much Jim Otto means to me. This one really hurts too bad. I can't go on the radio. And for a guy like Lincoln Kennedy to say that he can't go on the radio because it hurts too bad kind of let me know what Jim Otto meant to him and many others amongst the Raiders organization, including Mark Davis. As a matter of fact, on Sunday night, the Raiders on their social media put out Mark Davis at Allegiant Stadium lighting the Memorial Al Davis torch for Jim Otto. Here's Mark Davis. Check it out.
As the sun sets on the Raider Nation, I'm here at Allegiant Stadium to light the Al Davis Memorial Torch in honor of and tribute to Jim Otto, the original Raider. The entire Raider Nation's thoughts and prayers go out to Jim's wife Sally and the entire Otto family. Jim, May you rest in peace.
So I thought that was a really good touch by Mark Davis. And again, goes back to show you how much Jim Otto meant to the organization. This guy, when it was all said and done, had over 70 surgeries in his life, right? I mean, this guy had over 20 concussions in his playing time. This is a guy that had 6 months of basically being blind in one eye and still went out there and played. And oh, if you didn't know and you didn't hear me when I said it off top, never missed a game in 15 years. When I think of Jim Otto, even though I never saw him play, I think of what the Raiders are trying to be now. Tough, gritty, blue collar, right? Play football the way it's supposed to be played. For the love of the game, play it tough, win games, get back that championship DNA. That's who Jim Otto was. That's what he stood for. And honestly, that's what I think of. Again, never saw him play, but I still know what he means. And very honored that I was able to see him the final game of the season in 2023, that Week 18 victory over the Broncos at Allegiant Stadium. Saw him with all the greats there in the locker room. He was sitting in his wheelchair next to Ted Hendricks, and Jim Plunkett was standing next to both of them. And then Mike Haynes was in the locker room. Richard Seymour was in the locker room, and many others were in the locker room as well. And just celebrating that victory over the Broncos Week 18 and letting these guys all know what it means to be a Raider. But for Jim Otto to go through as much as he went through, still was at all the different Raider events, still was very kind to the fan base anytime they had an opportunity to interact with them, right? Loved being a Raider, was all about being a Raider. Just thought, he was again, the original Raider, and that's what it's all about. And that's why we celebrate him not only Monday on Raider Nation Radio 920, but also here today on the Locked On Raiders podcast. John Facenta, he had a little something to say about Jim Otto, and this is, pretty old, but it's really good stuff. And I just think it kind of epitomizes exactly who Jim Otto was. We know John Facenta is fantastic when he tells stories and narrates anything. Well, here he is talking about the late, great Jim Otto.
One loss cannot alter the decades of greatness that have witnessed the Raider monumental climb to the top. One man who so symbolized Raider commitment to excellence is Jim Otto. Otto arrived in Oakland in 1960, the Raiders' first year, and started every game for 15 seasons. A keystone of so many outstanding Raider teams, Otto was a perennial giant among Raider giants, and twice won the Gorman Award as the player who best exemplified the pride and spirit of the Oakland Raider organization. Double O contributed much to the respect and national acclaim that came to these proud warriors in silver and black. Interior linemen often go unnoticed by the crowd, but Jim Otto won the recognition of his peers. On August 2nd, 1980, original Raider Jim Otto was enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. His will to win spanned 2 glorious decades. And as a new decade begins, this Raider commitment to excellence still burns fiercely as it has through these decades of destiny.
Great stuff right there with John Facenta. And it's like everything that I was able to find, any kind of NFL films, audio that I was able to find, I had ready for Monday, man. I was ready to make sure to honor Jim Otto, and we did it all day long on the radio station. And again, was upset that I missed the opportunity to do that on Monday here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, to the point where I woke up multiple times throughout the course of the night and was like, man, and it was bothering me. And then I had Raider Nation reach out to me, and I respect that, reach out to me thinking that I forgot about Jim Otto. I didn't forget. It was just the timing of the recording, and it sucks. But sometimes it happens like that, and I try to get the show up and get it up as early as possible so people can enjoy it no matter where they're at, what time zone they're in. Always try to get it first thing first, but it just obviously backfired on me for Monday's episode, and so that was unfortunate. Well, Jim Otto was honored by many, was talked about by many, and this goes back to the NFL Top 100 list where he came in at number 63. Bill Berge, he's a guy that played linebacker in the NFL for about 10 years, and he had a moment where he was really getting the best of Jim Otto, and John Madden was yelling at Otto and telling him to block him, and Berge was like, coach, he's not fast enough. Well, Otto came back the next year and let him know how fast he really was. But here's Bill Berge telling the story of Jim Otto on the NFL Top 100 list at number 63. Check it out. Cool stuff here.
Was making tackles all over the place. John Madden is screaming at Jim Otto, come on, get to him, for crying out loud. I looked up at Madden and I said, Coach, he's not fast enough. The following year, we're playing out in Oakland. He hits me, undresses me, and I am absolutely out cold. And John Madden looks down at me and he says, well, Berge, is he fast enough now? And I go, uh-huh. Double zeros, when you see double zeros, it's not good at all. You want to stay away as far as you can from the double zero man. This guy was awesome, a demon with a killer's instinct. Jim Otto had what I call the 6-inch punch. Just before impact, he would be able to coil his body and really rip into you. Now, a middle linebacker, defensive players, we don't feel ouch, ooh, hurt, and pain. But let me tell you what, when Jim Otto hits you, guess what? It hurts.
I've never been afraid of anything. I could play against King Kong, I think, and we'd have a battle.
You know, I think the face mask was probably bent a little bit. He had kind of like a little hook in his nose.
My nose would be broken all year long. It would just get broken each game. I get pushed on one side of my face, then on the other side of my face.
He ran kind of funny. He had a little bit of a pot gut.
My number, 00, came from a nickname, and it was Ott.
And Mr. AFL 00 Jim Otto, the 9-year All-Pro center.
They called me Buckethead because I had a helmet size 8 1/8. I had a very large head. And then I was one of the older guys on the team, and they called me Pops.
Jim Otto was an original Raider, at the center of it all. From 19 straight losses in the early 60s to Oakland's last-minute win in the Heidi Bowl. He was there for the Raiders' first ever Super Bowl. In 1972, he even caught a pass in a playoff game in Pittsburgh, although everyone remembers the game for another reception. In his second-to-last game, he snapped the ball for the famous Sea of Hands catch, the Raiders' most dramatic playoff win ever. By the time he was done, he had played in 308 straight games, the most in Raider history.
I've had 39 surgeries. I've had 28 knee surgeries. Both knees are artificial. I've had 8 artificial knees. We loved to play football. We beat the hell out of each other and had a great time doing it. At that particular time, I thought maybe I shouldn't have done it, but as soon as you heal up a little bit, you think, gosh, I'd do it again.
So I thought that was fantastic. And, you know, Hall of Famers, normally you can't tell the story of the NFL without them. You cannot tell the story of the NFL without Jim Otto, what he means to the Raiders and what he means to the league. Again, bigger than even the Raiders organization. I don't want to say bigger like he's bigger than the team, but it goes farther out than just the team. It goes NFL wide. And he was respected and loved by many. Again, just being the ultimate warrior. Obviously, players aren't like he was, right? And the NFL doesn't want him to be like that. The NFL doesn't want to have 30-something surgeries while the guy is still playing. They don't want them to have 20 concussions. More times than not, if they have a bunch of concussions, the league will now take the helmet away from the player to save them from themselves. They don't want to see a player lose their right leg, get it amputated like Jim Otto had to do. But that's just how he was built. And back in the day, if you didn't play, you didn't get paid. So he was out there for the love of the game. He was out there making a living for his family. And there was no, hey, I'm going to sit this one out this week, right? It wasn't like that with Jim Otto. Again, the ultimate, Iron Man and ultimate original Raider, and got to show nothing but love to Jim Otto. Jim Otto was a Hall of Famer, introduced in 1980 by Al Davis. You'll hear that Hall of Fame speech, and Al Davis present him. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of this show, which is Game Time. Now that we have the NFL schedule in our hand, now you have an opportunity to go through and decide what games you want to go to, what games you see on the schedule that you say, you know what, that's a good one. The Raiders might not have a bunch of primetime games, but this is a game that I want to see. Maybe it's week 2 against Baltimore. Hell, maybe it's week 1 against the Chargers, week 18 against the Chargers. The Falcon game, right? Was that week 15, that Monday Night Football game, right? They've got a handful of games that could be very interesting. Maybe you're in Kansas City and want to go to that Black Friday game that's at Arrowhead instead of Allegiant Stadium. Maybe that's the one that you want to pick out. Game Time's going to help get you there. No matter what game it is, they'll get you there. And oh, by the way, you don't have to buy the tickets right away. You can wait for the last minute deals. We have people that call all the time. Q, where can I get tickets? Where can I get tickets? Game Time. They'll hook you up. They got priority last minute deals. They got flash deals, zone deals, all in prices, seat views. You can actually see where you're going to be sitting before you make your purchase. Game Time ticket coverage. They have you covered like a glove, and with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticket industry, and lowest price guarantee where they'll credit you 110% of the difference. Right now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, continuing with the celebration of life for Jim Otto. Passed away at age 86 on Sunday. He was the original Raider, played 15 years with the Silver and Black, and never missed a game. That's really all you need to know. But want to give you an opportunity to hear his Hall of Fame speech, just in case you didn't get a chance to hear it already. Al Davis presents him, and then Otto takes it away. So here you go. Without further ado, I ain't got to say nothing. They can do all the talking. Al Davis and Jim Otto in the Hall of Fame in enshrinement.
For 2 memorable decades, the last 20 years, the Oakland Raiders have had the greatest players, the greatest coaches, the greatest plays, and performed in the greatest games ever played in the annals of sport. During the period of 1960 to 1974, the Oakland Raiders had the best record in professional football. Among the greatest players, the quarterbacks during these years were names like Flores, LaMonica, the legendary Blanda, Stabler, Constant, one center, one captain, one original Raider who started in each of the 210 consecutive regular season games during those 15 years. His name was Jim Otto, his number 00. For 13 straight years since 1960, he was All-Pro, the only All-Pro center in American Football League history. Followed by 3 years as the All-Pro center of the American Football Conference following the merger with the National Football League. He played in every one of the 9 American Football League All-Star games and in the first 3 AFC, NFC Pro Bowl games. He had played and started in 308 games as a Raider. This longevity included 73 preseason contests, 210 regular season games, 13 postseason games, and 12 All-Star contests. Commitment to excellence, pride and poise, the greatness of our football team were not only exemplified by Jim Otto, but for more than a decade, he was the standard of excellence by which centers were judged in professional football. He was the most honored offensive lineman in the history of professional football. But statistics are just the measure of accomplishment, not really the measure of man. If it is true that great men inspire in others the will to be great, that alone qualifies Jim to be a great man. He had towering courage in spite of adverse injuries. His loyalty, devotion, and dedication still carry on in Oakland and reap the rewards of victory. While the word company man has a bad and a good connotation, Jim Otto was an organization man. He played football for the organization. He wanted to win for the organization. Plain old-fashioned wholesomeness was not passé. He was an organization's dream. The enshrinement here in Canton of Jim Otto is like a reaffirmation of the values and the virtues of what is still the American way of life. Religion, family, and country, as he preferred them in that order. And the virtues and the fires that burned brightest in him were the great love and enthusiasm that he had and has for the game of football and for everyone and everything in life. He loved the American Football League, of which he was an original. And some of the legendary heroes of that great league, Lamar Hunt, John Madden, Ben Davidson, to name a few, are here today. He loved the Oakland Raiders, and he loved the game of football. But the important thing was he embellished all of them to a degree never surpassed. I love to come here to this hall, I've done it many times, and walk through the exhibits to pay tribute to the great men who we idolized as youngsters, and we still idolize today, including this great class, Adderley, Jones, Lilly, and Otto. I'd sign them all today if I could. And we share in their glory. It brings a realization, and I've said this many times, of a debt we owe to them, and a firm resolution that we'll never forget that debt. Jim Otto, the caissons have stopped rolling, the cannons are still, the playing field is quiet, the crowds no longer roar, that silver and black uniform is retired. But I can still faintly hear the national anthem, and those of us who saw the Rattles and the Raiders battle to the top during the last decade will never forget you. And now, no one else will forget you, because the name of Jim Otto will ring down the corridors of remembered time as long as this Hall of Fame immortalizes the greatest warriors of the greatest game. My friend, someone that I'll always love, someone who's been a vital part of my life, and I would hope that I've been a vital part of his, my friend Jim Otto, Hall of Famer.
There's really one person I have to thank, and that's the good Lord. I praise him and bless him. It started out with a dream, and it wasn't an unconscious dream. It was a daydream. It started when I was about 11 years old, and part of that dream is coming to an end today, but the rest of the dream will go on. Daydreams are the best because you can always remember them, and you can work on a daydream to make it come true. My favorite daydream was that I was going to be a professional football player someday, and it was at the age of 11, while listening to a football game on the radio, that I told my grandfather that someday I was going to be a professional football player. And it wasn't long before that day began. Not all dreams come true. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of pride, and above all, a lot of faith and prayer. And I thank and praise God for the help he gave me, for putting the right people in the right places for me. For without these people, my dream would not have come true. My 4 years in high school were tough, and it was at this time that certain people became a big part in making my dream come true. My parents, who are here today, were a great part of that. They gave me a lot of support and help, and were always there when I needed them. My minister, Pastor Bredeman, back in Wausau, Wisconsin, was a big help in getting me going as a youngster. Back in those days, things were hard. There wasn't too much money. And at one time, I started getting cards from the YMCA giving me a membership. I never knew who paid that membership until I was about 34 years old, and I went home to Wausau for a visit to speak at the high school dinner, and Pastor Bredeman was there to give the invocation. And it was at that time he told me, he says, Jim, he called me James, he says, James, when you went to our Lutheran school, he says, there was a bit of shyster in you, and it had to come out, and I knew the only way to get it out was sending you to the YMCA. And he was the one who gave me the membership to the YMCA all those years. So I have to thank him. And as you can see, God put these people out there for me so I could be guided properly. There was another man who played an important role in my life, and that was Tom Yellish. Tom Yellish was a school teacher in Wausau, Wisconsin, and he was my first Little League coach at the age of 12. He later became my offensive line coach in high school, and he was the best teacher of line fundamentals that I'd ever seen. And also my high school coach, Win Brockmeyer, who sent Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch here a few years back. Win Brockmeyer passed away just a few months ago, and he was to be here with us today, and I really miss him. He was a great builder of character and had some super records, second to none, and very comparable with teams of the Massillon area. There were always great people available to me. In college, there was Andy Gustafson, Walt Kaczewski, Stitch Very, and others. And as the years passed, a little more of my dream was to come true. I was passed up by the National Football League in the draft in 1959. It was, I think, December 1959. But lucky for me, the American Football League was being formed. People like Lamar Hunt, Wilson, Wayne Valley, people like that were forming a league, giving some of us fellas an opportunity to play. And it was at that time I got my shot. But the first 3 years in the American Football League were more of a nightmare of a dream than my dream come true. But it was during that time that probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me happened, and that was when I married my beautiful wife, Sally, and I think she just pulled me out of that nightmare. For without her, I think my dream might have fizzled, and I love her for her understanding and patience for all these years in football and all the problems I may have caused in our home. Not only was her patience and understanding great, but also those of our children. There are times when a father becomes impatient during the football season, but Jennifer and Jimmy were always there, and they always put up with their dad. And I'm very proud of my daughter, Jennifer. She's going to make me a grandfather soon. And her husband, Glenn Callahan, we're very proud of those people. And also my son, Jimmy. I'm looking forward to him with a lot of pride because I can't wait to watch him grow and achieve in sports, and he's just an outstanding person to school as well, and it just makes me very proud to have them with me here. In 1963, things began to change, and my dream was alive again. And I thank God for bringing the right people into my dream once again. At that time, a young man was to become the head coach and general manager of the Oakland Raiders to motivate me and guide me to where I am standing today, and that man is Al Davis. He sold me on the Raiders, and not only that, he sold me on myself. He, along with Ollie Spencer as my line coach, John Madden as my head coach, kept me motivated to play in some of the most exciting football games ever played in the National Football League. The great come-from-behind wins, the fluke plays for us, some of the fluke plays for the other team, but you remember some of those games. I don't have to tell you about those. They were a great part in making my dream come true. The dream must go on now, but only to my other plans, and that is to help my fellow man in some way and to save my own soul. And I'm going to do that with the help of God. So to all of the many people that I mentioned, the selection committee, Pete Elliott, Don Smith, John Bankert, Mr. Schreiber, and the Board of Trustees, my family and I thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and God bless you all.
So there you go. Greatness right there. Big shout out to the Raiders for sending that over. So JT the Brick and myself were having it and had it available for our radio shows on Monday. And I wanted to make sure I brought it along and pass it along here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. I realize not everyone gets a chance to hear my radio show, so may not have been able to hear that and may not have been able to hear any of the tributes to Jim Otto on Monday. And since I didn't do it on the podcast on Monday, I wanted to make sure I did it for today. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts throughout that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. There's some text about Jim Otto. There's some calls about Jim Otto and more. We'll do that coming up. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, tell you about FanDuel, and it's winner take all time in the NBA and the NHL. You see the NBA is set with the Western Conference Finals, the Eastern Conference Finals coming up. You've got the Timberwolves, who knocked off the Nuggets. They'll be taking on the Dallas Mavericks. You got the Pacers, who knocked off the Knicks. They'll be taking off the Boston Celtics. And man, that's going to be interesting, right? Cannot wait to see how that one shakes out. I've got the Timberwolves, and I want to say I got the Pacers, but I don't know if I trust them just right now, right? Boston's been that team that's been blowing everybody out, so most likely they'll play with their food and lose a game, but they'll probably end up punching their ticket to the NBA Finals. But I got Timberwolves on the Western side of things for sure, so we'll see how the Eastern side shakes out. But right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bets. $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Paul the Barber. He's calling to talk about the Raiders offseason, what he thinks about it, and also has a message to Raider Nation. Here he is, Paul the Barber.
Yo, what's up, Q? It's Paul the Barber calling in. I just wanted to touch on something real quick. Excuse me. So I just feel like this offseason, the Raiders have done a good job. Mark Davis and company, they've done a good job. I like to say, in my opinion, we've had a pretty good offseason. They kind of they gave the fans what we wanted, at the end of last season, we were all, probably about 95% of the Raider fans were campaigning for Antonio Pierce, hire AP, and he did so. Mark Davis did so. He gave us what we wanted. Tom Telesco, I understand he wasn't our first choice at GM, but man, he's doing a hell of a job. I believe, we hit a home run with Christian Wilkins in free agency, giving us a dynamic player on defense, to go alongside Max Crosby and all. And I feel like the draft was pretty solid, man. He got a big time weapon for either Minshew or O'Connell, and for him to play alongside Michael Mayer and Devontae and company. And I just feel like, with Jackson Powers Johnson, like we really hit this offseason. So now I say all that to say this, we got to do our part, Raider Nation, and we got to show up to games this year. And I understand, it can get expensive at times. I understand that, we got a lot of things going on that we got to pay for, but, we can't complain about, opposing team fans being in the stadium when we're not even going at all. I've been to one game each year since it's been open, and I'm just the average Joe, middle class working guy, you know what I mean? But we can save up, man. We can do it. There's specials, shout out to the Game Time, app, like, how you mentioned in the app. There's specials on there, man. You can find cheap tickets. You can find cheap hotels. Do what you got to do to get there, man. It's fun. It's a great atmosphere. And I understand Vegas is a destination. It's a tourist destination for opposing teams, and they want to get on it quick and they want to go to games. But I just feel like we can do better as a home fan base. You know what I mean? Like, we can get to more games and we can make the stadium a little bit more black. You know what I mean? A little bit more black and silver than the opposing team's colors. You know what I mean? I'm just saying all that, man. I'm just saying that because, watching a game from TV sometimes, like, man, there's a lot of red in the stadium, or there's a lot of blue, or there's a lot of yellow. I'm just saying we can do better, Raider Nation. So, AP, they gave us AP. They gave us a lot this off season. Let's give back, and man, let's fill up those stands with a lot of black and silver. Let's go, Raider Nation, baby.
Paul, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And I do agree. The team has had a good offseason. I don't think they've made a bunch of big splashes. Of course, Christian Wilkins was, but I thought they were going to be a lot busier in free agency, and they really weren't. They added some key players here and there. Obviously, Gardner Minshew was a really good insurance policy, and him and Aiden O'Connell will battle it out for the starting quarterback spot. But that was something good that they needed. Christian Wilkins was clearly a priority, right? They've obviously brought in a couple other free agents as well. The draft has gone on. I think that they've done some good things. I really do. I don't think it's made the most noise, but that's okay. You don't have to make the most noise to have a really good offseason. So I'm with you. I think Tom Telesco has a really good plan, and I think more importantly, him and AP are on the same page. Now, as far as tickets go and going to games, and I think the Raiders are going to be good. I don't think that they're going to be, a Super Bowl contender, but I do think that they have an opportunity to win, 9 to 10 games and make it into the playoffs. And then once you get in the playoffs, you'll see what happens after that. But, you gotta win games. You gotta have your home fans support your team. I can't get mad at fans that have tickets and want to sell them and move on from them. But I also don't want to have fans that complain about, opposing fans in the stands when you are the one that buys the tickets and sells them, right? Or has tickets and sells them. So if that's what you do, then you can't complain about who's in the stands. And I'm not saying that's for everybody, but perfect example, before the schedule even dropped, I saw someone on Twitter, there was a Raider fan, season ticket holder, said, I have 4 games that I'm going to be selling tickets to. If you're interested, DM me. 4 games, that's half of the home schedule. They were already ready to sell them before the schedule even drops. So that let me know right now, well, okay, that's an opportunity for an opposing fan to go ahead and get it. Now, obviously, it's an opportunity for Raider Nation to buy the tickets as well, but let's be honest about the situation. More likely than not, those tickets are going to end up going to whoever's paying the most money, and that could be an opposing fan. But, again, I'm not here to judge people what they do with their tickets. Vegas is one of those destinations that opposing fans are always going to want to go to. I get that. I understand that. But, again, if they start winning a lot of games, they get ready to make a playoff push, I do believe, especially if they continue to win games at home like they did last season, I do believe you'll see more Raider Nation in the stands. But thanks so much for that call, my man. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a text from New York Old School Raider. Yo, Q. New York Old School Raider again. Listen to you every day, bro. But it is with a heavy heart we lost one of our 5-star generals, Mr. Raider, Jim Otto. Once a Raider, always a Raider, and only a Raider. Our first Hall of Fame Raider. Never missed a game. He had by far the best uniform ever. The black jersey, the thick white neck brace, the name and number, same forwards or backwards. An intelligent, classy person that represented us well on and off the field. You have often asked about our Raider Mount Rushmore. The 4 Raider leaders of all time. For me, that could only be Al Davis, John Madden, Tom Flores, and the Princess of Darkness, Amy Trask. But my 5-star generals, ones who did it in the trenches and fought the fight, they're Jim Otto first, Jim Upshaw second, Art Shell third, Freddie Bolitnikoff fourth, and Old Man Willie Brown fifth. Please educate the younger generation on who this legend Jim Otto was. As always, just win, baby, and Raiders. That's from New York Old School Raider, and thanks so much for the text. And I think that you summed it up perfectly, right? I mean, this was a Raider through and through, right? Again, the first Hall of Famer. He was with the Raiders in 1960, the first year of their existence. Right, he was the guy that even played a role in getting them back to Oakland when they were in L.A., when they moved back in 95. He played a role in that. I mean, he's just a guy that represented the Raiders well, represented the Raiders everywhere he went, right, on and off the field. He was one of those guys, as you said, a 5-star general that players didn't want to mess up on the field because then they had to come to the sideline and answer to Jim Otto, right? He was one tough dude, a guy that had, over the course of his lifetime, over 70-something surgeries. Right, the guy had a right leg amputated, right, because of complications from all the injuries that he suffered, right, and that's nothing to shake a stick at or laugh at, but that's just who Jim Otto was. And the thing about him, with all that going on, every time I saw him, had a smile on his face. Even the last time I saw him in the Raiders locker room, Week 18, big smile on his face as he sat there next to Ted Hendricks, and then Jim Plunkett stood next to him. Big smile on his face. So, yeah, I mean, Jim Otto, there's a lot of history there. I mean, you can Google, you can YouTube, and see who he was. I never got to see him play, but I know the greatness of 00, Jim Otto, as you said, the original Raider. Thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Raider Louie from Escondido. He's calling to talk about Aiden O'Connell and the backing or lack of backing from the fan base. Here he is, Raider Louie.
Thank you. This is Raider Louie from Escondido. First-time caller. Love the show. Thanks for everything that you put out there for us. I just want to reach out and talk a point about Aiden O'Connell and something that I haven't heard much of in terms of backing him as a starting quarterback for the Raiders. Aiden reminds me of what the epitome of the typical Raider fan looks like. He is someone that has worked his butt off, his blue collar. He's had to work for everything that he's got, and that just kind of reminds me of how the Raider fan or the Raider Nation fan base is built up. And so I'm not understanding why we're not embracing him more and, backing him up for the starting job this year. Now, is he going to be a star? Who knows? He might turn out to be great. He might turn out to be a dud, but we as Raider fans, sometimes we're a little bit delusional in certain parts of our fandom, where we're just too hard on a particular player, or we give him too much props. So I think we just need to back him. He's going to be the starter, I think, this year. And he is a blue-collar hard worker, just like most Raider fans are. So in that sense, I think we need to back him and have his back throughout the season. Again, thanks for what you do, and go Raiders.
Louie, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And honestly, I think for the most part, the fan base is embracing and backing Aiden O'Connell. And why I say that is there's been so many people that have called in or texted in and said, don't sleep on Aiden O'Connell. Don't sleep on Aiden O'Connell. I think more people have Aiden O'Connell's back than most people believe. I don't think anyone on this podcast is sleeping on Aiden O'Connell. I think that everyone looks at the situation and realizes that, okay, the AFC has some really talented quarterbacks. The AFC West has some really talented quarterbacks, right? And so, you could look at the Raiders quarterback room and say, okay, Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, it may not be to the level of those guys like the Mahomes, the Herberts, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, the, others, and insert, other really good, Joe Burrow when healthy, right? I mean, there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in the AFC in general, but I think that everyone realizes that you can win games with Aiden O'Connell, right? It's going to be up to him to take that next step. What's his ceiling? That's the big question, right? I mean, look, I back him up. I think he's going to be the starting quarterback this year. With that being said, I still think that at some point the Raiders need an elite quarterback, or one that they feel like is an elite to the degree that he can battle with Patrick Mahomes consistently. Aiden O'Connell might end up being that guy. I like him a lot. I really do. But I also have no problem being honest and saying I think that, the Raiders at some point need to even get more, right? I mean, that's just what it is. Sometimes you need to get better. Even in Kansas City, they had Alex Smith, and he was good. Got him to the playoffs every year, but they needed more. They need to get over the top. I think that is at one point what the Raiders are going to need, someone that can maybe get them over the top. But as far as backing Aiden O'Connell, absolutely. I got his back. I think that, the season when it starts, the first game against the Chargers at SoFi, I think the quarterback will be Aiden O'Connell. Thanks so much for the call. I do appreciate you. Got time for one more text. This comes from Big Dave in South Dakota. It says, Q, I feel there are several out there in Raider Nation that are sleeping on Aiden O'Connell. Not so much you, but others. We only have last year's stats on Aiden. He had a first-year play caller with 15 to 20 plays in his book. Now that we have a guy with a little bit more experience calling plays and a lot more plays to call, I feel like Aiden will be extremely better. Not to dog on Minshew, but I think we have a pretty solid 1-2 punch for quarterbacks. History shows us we don't have to have an elite quarterback to win championships. We just need the team to play together. As always, thanks for the show. The nation approves. That's Big Dave in South Dakota. I think that kind of says it all, and really going back to the last call that we have from Raider Louie kind of summarized that text as well. So we'll go ahead and take one more call just to close out with OD Raider E. He's calling to talk about the Raiders and what their overall record could be and who the team is that the Raiders could replace in the playoffs in 2024.
Hey, what's going on, Q? It's OD Raider E. Just calling in just to respond to your message on Thursday. Before I begin, I just want to say thank you for everything you do. Love the show. Been listening since 2021 and been a Raiders fan since I was 8 in the 90s. But anyways, I just want to say, just reply to your Thursday episode. I'm thinking we're going to repeat 2021 without the drama and just go 10-7 and respond to Friday's show where you asked about what teams we can replace. I think we're going to replace the Steelers, and I think we're going to replace the Browns. The Steelers, just for the simple fact that I love Mike Tomlin, but they're on the decline. And the Browns, if Deshaun's not healthy again, for sure we can replace them as well. And also, I want to reply to Derek from Connecticut on the Chargers, on the way he was talking about the Chargers. I just want to say that's pretty laughable because if you put 63 points on a team, they should just should put some respect on your name at that point until they beat you. So it's kind of crazy. They're just like talking about that. But anyways, I appreciate everything that you do. Still requesting that you do like a double disc episode again. I love those. just taking it back. Big Tupac fan, so I love those like double discs. Reminds me of that a little bit. And when you can, do one if you can. I know you're a busy guy. Let me know. Thank you. OD Raider E, signing out.
OD Raider E, thanks for the call, my man. 10-7 is reasonable, I feel like. That was my window, not too crazy. 9-8 to 10-7. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into that, but I feel like that window is reasonable. Seems like the AFC North is where most are picking teams that the Raiders could potentially replace. And look, that's a very competitive division. So you figure that, it's got to be won by, I would say, either Baltimore or Cincinnati, right? Okay, so there's that's a division winner. Is the wild card going to come out of there? If so, are they going to have 3 teams that make the playoffs like they did a year ago? There's a good chance that no, that's not. So that's a good possibility. But there's a lot to go into that conversation. And I promise you, I know I've said it 3 times now in a row, we will have that conversation here on the podcast. But with the whole Jim Otto and with me missing, Monday's show, not being able to talk about and honor Jim Otto, I felt I had to make sure I did it today. So I know that we'll have a lot coming out of, OTAs from today, phase 3 of the camp, right, where we talk to the coordinators and we talk to some players. So I can't guarantee that it's going to be tomorrow's show, maybe Thursday, maybe we'll close out the week with it on Friday, but it will happen this week. I promise that. That's the one thing I can do for sure. I can tell you that it will happen sometime this week, but because of special circumstances, and I think that we all can make a exception for the late, great Jim Otto and say, yeah, that's okay to push that subject back a day. That is no problem. But we'll get to it, I promise, sometime this week. But OD, thanks so much for the call. I appreciate you. Still got a text from Moose from the 843. Tadreese in New Jersey hit us with a call. Ohio Raider hit us up with a text. We'll get that all tomorrow on the show. Plus, as I mentioned, sounds from the coordinators, sounds from the players, and feedback on what I was able to see and hear at OTA's day 2 of phase 3 of the mini camp. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.